haven't done a Natasha Denona palette ranking in almost 3 years at this point, which seems just kind of wild to me that it's been that long. So that's what we're here to do today. I'm going to rank all of my Natasha Denona palettes. Now, I'm not someone who has all of the palettes. There are quite a few palettes that she's released over the last like 2-ish years that I never end up picking up. The My Dream palette, the Golden palette, the Yucca palette, or Yucca, the Xenon palette, the new Roxa palette, the new purple one she released a couple months ago at this point. So there are quite a few palettes that I do not own from her, but the ones that I do have, we're going to sit down and rank for you guys. If you did see my last video that I put up, it was an eyeshadow palette declutter, and I did declutter 4 Natasha Denona palettes, which was honestly kind of shocking to me, I'm not gonna lie, because I love her palettes. She's one of my favorite brands. I love her eyeshadow formulation, but I just was not getting any use out of those palettes, so that's the reason I ended up decluttering them. Not because they're bad palettes, they're just not ones I'm going to be reaching for. I did, however, decide to include those 4 palettes in this ranking because, like I said, they're not bad palettes. I just wasn't reaching for them, and if you had your eye on them, I wanted to go ahead and give you my thoughts on them. So I did want to include them in the ranking, but if you saw that video and you're thinking like, girlfriend, didn't you declutter those? Yes, I did. They are still decluttered from my collection. I am still going to donate them, and they are the bottom 4 palettes, but I didn't want to leave them out, you know what I mean? Also, I will go ahead and have my other Natasha Denona palette ranking video linked down below for you in case you want to check it out, because that was like 3 years ago, and a lot of you guys were not here 3 years ago, so please be kind to me. I feel like I've gotten a little bit better at YouTube in the last 3 years. Just keep that in mind if you decide to go watch that video, please. Also, sorry, I know I'm like chit-chatting a lot in the beginning of this video. I've seen quite a few Natasha Denona palette ranking videos from other creators, and a lot of them don't include their mini palettes with their midi and larger palettes. I've heard quite a few people say that you can't really compare the minis to the larger palettes because they're not as good of a deal. You get less shades, you can't make as many looks, and while I agree with that, inherently I do agree with that statement, I'm including them in this palette ranking because I love my mini palettes, the small ones, the 5 pans. I use them just as much as my larger 15 pan palettes, if not more, if I'm being honest. I love the mini tiny palettes, so I am including them in this ranking. They're all going to be mushed together in one big ranking today. I do have 16 palettes here to talk to you about today, so let's go ahead and get started. In number 16, the last place, is the Natasha Denona, well, duh, I'm not going to say Natasha Denona for every single palette because that would be very redundant, but it's the Retro Glam palette. I just could not get on board with this palette, unfortunately. The color story is absolutely stunning. However, Natasha Denona likes to do this in a bunch of her palettes, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, where she has quite a few shades that look very similar to each other in pan, and sometimes they end up looking different on the eye and sometimes they don't, and unfortunately this is a palette that I feel like they end up looking the same. So these 2 shades right here look exactly the same on the eyes, as well as these 2 pinks, which is shocking because in pan they really do look very different. Even these 2 metallics that again look pretty different in pan end up looking the same on the eye. This is one of her cream to powders that I actually just don't really like that formulation, and then this pink shade is just a tone that I personally do not like to wear on me. It pulls a little red, a little funky on my skin tone. So overall, this isn't a bad palette. I just think some of the shades are a bit repetitive. A lot of the looks that I make are similar to each other, and with my preferences on how I'm doing my makeup these days, I'm not going to be reaching for this palette. Number 15 is the Mini Glam palette. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this cute little mini 5 pan. It is a really stunning palette. However, these tones, I'm going to reach for other Natasha Denona palettes in my collection, like that's going to be higher in the ranking that I'm going to talk about. That's very, very similar tones. So it just doesn't really make sense for me to keep this little palette because I'm not reaching for it, because if I want these tones, I'm going to reach for the other palettes I'm going to talk about later, you know what I mean? But I actually really do like this palette. I think the 2 mattes that you get are really great. This is a great transition shade. This is a really great deepening shade. You can use it as a liner. And then the 3 shimmers you get are also really pretty. You have quite a range of depths in the shimmers for it only being a 5 pan palette. This is like a really bright shimmery sort of one, and then you have a more taupey deepening one, and then you have this one here that's just kind of like a goldy bronze. So I think all 3 of these go really nicely with the 2 mattes that you're getting in the palette, and overall I do enjoy this palette. I think it's stunning. I'm just not reaching for it, so that's why I decluttered it, and that's why it's in 15. In 14th place, we have the Mini Zendo. I was a little bit shocked with myself when I decluttered this in my palette declutter because I do like this palette. However, when I reach for it, every single time I do the exact same look. I put this shade in the crease, I put this in the crease and deepen it, or on the outer corner and up into the crease and deepen it, and then I put this really pretty like orangey pinky shade all over my lid, and that's like the look I do every single solitary time I use this palette. This silver shade in the middle honestly just kind of confuses me. It's very beautiful, but I just don't really know how to incorporate it in this palette. And then this one right here is just a shade that I don't really reach for very often. It's just a deep almost like taupey purple shade. I don't know. It's really pretty. It's just in this palette, for me, it doesn't make sense. So because I'm using only 3 out of the 5 shades and I'm doing the exact same look every single time, I did go ahead and declutter it, and I'm going to donate it because I just feel like someone else will get better use out of it. Now, I will say the quality on this is really, really pretty. I actually genuinely enjoy this palette. The midi Zendo, the larger one, I had that palette a while ago. I ended up decluttering it. I did not like the quality in that one, but the quality in this one is actually really beautiful. So if you had your eye on it and you think you would use all 5 of these shades, I do recommend it. Coming in rank number lucky 13, this palette was a little hard for me to declutter. I'm not going to lie. I am ultimately going to part ways with it, but it is a stunning palette. It's the Natasha... I'm not saying that. It is the Love palette. Now, me and the Love palette, we have a history. I've had this palette for like 4 or 5 years at this point. I have used it a ton of times. These 2 shades right here have pretty large dips in them. I used to really, really love this palette. These were tones that I felt very comfortable in a couple of years ago. These like bright, poppy, pinky tones. The quality on this palette is very nice, and I enjoyed these tones on myself back then. Like I said, I got a lot of use out of this a couple years ago. However, now I just am not using it. If I'm gonna reach for a pinky sort of palette, it's gonna be a lot more subdue shades on me because these are like pretty bright and poppy. Like they look kind of bright in the pan, and then on the eyes, at least on my fair skin tone, they do end up being very bright and vibrant, which is beautiful. And if that's the look you're going for, I think you would actually really enjoy this palette. Those were mainly the tones that I ended up using in this palette. The purple ones I never really got too much use out of, and I did reach for the golds every once in a while, but for me, when I was using this palette, I would go for like a really pink look, which makes sense when you're looking at the palette. So again, it has nothing to do with the quality. It's just solely based on my preferences and the type of eyeshadow looks I'm making these days, and they are not going to be bright pink eyeshadow. But I do still recommend this palette if you are into colorful, bright pink eyeshadow. I think you would like it. From here on up in my ranking, I do still have all these in my collection. I do still reach for most of them. I will give more details on that as I'm going through the palettes, but where are we at? In 12th place, it is the mini Lila palette or Lila palette. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce it. So this one is ranked as low as it can be without being the ones I decluttered because I only kept this for these 2 shades. These 3 right here, I really never reach for, if I'm being honest. This blue is confusing. This purple got patchy on me the last time I wore it, and I'm pretty sure this one did too. The quality on this palette is not really the best. I kind of don't really recommend it for you guys anyways, and I actually don't know if she still sells this palette. She might not, but the only reason I kept it was for these 2 shades right here. This is the most beautiful, perfect brown neutrally transition shade. I love this, and then this gold on top is just stunning. These 2 shades right here make the most effortless, simple eye look without being too overdone. It makes you look like you're really put together, but it's not too intense. Like these 2 shades, something about them, I just love them so stinking much. So don't really recommend this. Don't know if she still sells it. Only kept it for these 2 shades, and if you can see, I have like a pretty big dip in the shimmer. In the 11th place, we have the Sunrise palette, which this is the very first midi that she ever released. This baby is old. I want to say this is from like 2020, I think, question mark. So I've had this palette for quite a few years. And while it is on the more colorful side, and I am not really reaching for color these days, when I open this palette, I still feel happy. I have really good memories with this palette. Most of the looks that I've made over the years with it, I've absolutely loved. I've made some of my favorite looks ever. And these more like warm, yellowy, orangey tones, I actually really do like on me. I don't love a super orangey brown look, if that makes sense, but these like actual fiery orange tones I do like on me. I know it's weird. It doesn't make much sense, but I'm just being honest. So the shades in this tone family, like I really genuinely love. I don't really reach for these red, more like pinky red shades. And to be frank, this like deep one right here called Clove actually gets pretty patchy on me. So overall, it's not like my favorite quality of eyeshadows. Like some of them do get patchy on me, but the looks I've made and the experiences that I've had with this palette, I do genuinely love it. That's why I couldn't part with it when I did my declutter. Okay, number 10 is a palette that if I would have done this ranking years ago, which I guess I did do this ranking years ago, it would have been a lot higher than it is these days, but I'm just not reaching for it that much. I used to reach for it all of the time, and it is the Mini Retro palette. Now, I used to love this palette, and honestly, when I look at it, I still think it's stunning and beautiful. I still get excited when I open it and look at the shades. I just also get a little apprehensive to use it, just because these are not the tones and shades that I'm really going for these days, but this like pinky neutrally tone is so pretty on the eye, and then this one right here is a really unique shade in my collection. It's almost like a grungy, greeny gray shade. I don't fully know how to explain it, but it is beautiful on the eye, and then the 3 shimmers are just as stunning. You have this more like pinky tone one that has a really pretty shift to it. This is another really unique shade in my collection. It's just beautiful how like shiny and reflective it is. And then this one is almost more of like a topper shade. It doesn't have too much base pigmentation, but you put this over any of the eye look you make with those other 4 shades and it's just going to amp it up and make it look so sparkly and stunning and beautiful. And actually, as I'm swatching these shades right now, I'm thinking, man, I need to reach for this again. Because like I said, I used to reach for it all the time. I loved this palette. Like truly, I love this palette. This like sparkly shade has a really big dip in it. Like that is how much I used it. Even this pink one has a good size dip. So yeah, I need to pull this out and reach for it again because it is beautiful, stunning. The quality is amazing. The eye looks you can get are pretty unique, especially for Natasha Denona. I don't feel like these two. I don't feel like she has a ton of shades in her collection like these. So I recommend this. It's stunning and beautiful. I need to use it again. I've said that like 5 times. Next up, we have the mini gold palette. This is another one that is really stunning and unique in my collection. I love these green tones so much. Every time I use this palette, I feel really beautiful in the look that I make. The only shade I don't really use is this one right here, but these two matte shades are really beautiful. I love this more like neutrally brown shade, and this green, it actually is looking very, very green right now on my finger swatch, but on the eye, it does look a little bit more army green. And then we have this beautiful bright gold shade. I usually do not go for these really bright gold shades, but something about this one just has a hint of green to it that when you put it on the eye and pair it with the 2 mattes, it pulls more green than gold, and it is just stunning on the eye. And then this green shade as well. Oh, beautiful. Stop it. That is absolutely stunning. I use this a lot around Christmas time because I can make a really pretty like just green eye look, but you could obviously use this any time of the year. But yeah, if I am gonna reach for color, it's going to typically be greens, and these tones, just something about them are just chef's kiss. Next up in 8th place, we have the Glam Face Palette. Now this packaging is very, very reflective, so I'm gonna try not to blind you. Also, I had a casualty. It was sitting on the floor because I had put them all on the floor and like decided where my ranking was going to be. And I was sitting in my chair here and I went to go back up and one of the legs just fell on top of this and just cracked the mirror. So that's a bummer. But other than that, the inside of this palette is really pretty. So if you don't know anything about the face palette, it has a cream blush here and then a powder highlight here. I don't really use these two too often. I like them, they're pretty, but they're not like my go-tos. But these shades down here are really, really pretty. The 3 mattes you get are a perfect depth in my personal opinion. This is perfect for a transition. You can deepen with this, you can deepen a lot with this or line with this. And I just think that for my skin tone, these are really great shades for that neutrally brown, smoky sort of eye. And then these 2 shimmers, oh my gosh, this formulation from Natasha Denona is stunning. It's probably one of my favorite like shimmery formulations she's ever done. And I don't know if she's recreated these in any other palettes. She might have, I'm not sure. I'm not like that deep in the Natasha Denona lore to like know that, but I really wish she would because they're stunning. If you do know if they're in any other palettes, please let me know down below because I would love to pick up more of these shades. I usually don't go for anything this intense, but when I do want a really bold, intense eye, I reach for these. They're beautiful on their own. They're beautiful if you mix them together, do a halo eye, do like this lighter one on the inner portion and the deeper one on the outer portion. Any combination that you use these 5 shadows is going to be stunning and you're going to like your look. In 7th place, we have the I Need a Warm palette. I like this palette, I do. It's just not my favorite. A lot of the reviews that I was watching before I purchased this palette said that it was more on the neutrally warm leaning side. And on my skin tone and my undertones, I think it's my undertones, they do pull pretty warm on me. I do like this palette though. I think it's really pretty. I like the looks that I make with it. They just end up being a little warmer than I maybe anticipated when I bought this palette. But I've used this palette quite a few times on camera. I did a 1 week 1 palette with it. I've used it off camera. I do like this palette. I almost just thought I was going to fall head over heels in love with it and it was going to become like one of my favorites ever. And that just hasn't really became the case. I feel like these 2 shades right here end up looking really similar on the eyes. I don't love this like shifty one right here. It's like a orangey to green kind of shift. I just don't like that on my fair skin. And then even some of these shimmers end up looking pretty similar on the eye. Again, I like this palette. It's stunning. I get pretty looks with it, but just for those reasons, I couldn't rank it any higher. Please don't mind my hair and the fact that I really need a lip product on right now, but as I'm sitting here editing this video, I'm realizing that I probably should have put the I Need a Warm palette a little bit lower in my ranking. I feel like I ranked it in the place that I did. I think it's 7th, because it's a newer product to me and I feel like I have the bias that it's new and shiny and I wanted to rank it higher. And also the fact that the I Need Warm is a bigger 15 pan. I think that was another reason I felt like I needed to rank it higher. But listening to myself describe it versus listening to myself just now describe like the mini retro palette, the mini gold palette, I definitely feel like I love those palettes more. Just like obviously take this whole ranking with a grain of salt. But yeah, I'm just like editing and listening to myself and thinking like, girlfriend, you raved about the other palettes behind the I Need a Warm. You probably should have ranked it lower. So yeah, just wanted to insert this. In sixth place, we have a pretty new palette to me. I've only used it a couple of times. So you're probably thinking, why is it all the way up in sixth place? But that is just where I fell. And it is the Biba palette. This is the only larger $129 palettes that I own from her. So if you can see the difference in size between her midi palettes and her larger palettes, they are just a little bit bigger, and the pans are bigger as well. It's still 15 shades, but that's the difference between the larger and the midi palettes. Honestly, I like the midi size better. I prefer that size over this size. Again, this is the only larger one I have because they're pretty expensive. They're $129. I got mine on like a deal during Black Friday. It was like a bundle, all of the above. So I got a pretty good deal on it. And I had my eye on this for a very, very long time. A couple of times I used it, I was very impressed by it. I liked the looks I made. I thought they were pretty. I thought they were like neutrally. They were definitely in my comfort zone. These 3 shimmers that we get, it's a little bit of a bummer that it's only 3 shimmers out of this whole big palette. But the 3 shimmers we get, I feel comfortable wearing. They're not too intense or too sparkly on the eye. I could wear this all the time and not feel like I'm going overboard with my look. And then the mattes, I like all the different tones. I like the shades she chose. Like, I do really like this palette. However, if you also like this palette and you've had your eye on Biba for a long time, kind of like me, I had my eye on this palette for years before I decided to buy it. I'm here to tell you that if you buy the mini nude palette, which is coming up higher in my ranking, you will basically be getting this top row. And if you buy the mini Biba palette, which is also coming up in my ranking, you're pretty much getting this whole second row right here. So the only shades you're not getting by buying those 2 mini palettes, which are $27 each, so it's going to save you a lot of money, is this row down here, which you have like a more just tan. For me, it's a skin tone shade. It doesn't really show up. You do have these really pretty cool tone gray leaning shades that I am excited to dabble in. And then you get this like cool tone kind of dark brown, which I'm sure you have in a lot of other palettes. So while I really like this palette and I do enjoy my looks that I've made, I did enjoy my experience making them as well. I don't think you need the Biba palette. If you like these tones, I would just get the mini nude and the mini Biba and you got pretty much the whole palette right there for way cheaper. So I'm going to use this because I already bought it and I own it and I do like it. I'm just telling you that to try to save you some money if you also had your eye on this palette. Alrighty, and we are at the top 5. In 5th place, I ranked my Glam palette. This is an oldie but a goodie. Mine squeaks when it opens, so be ready. Yeah. Isn't that obnoxious? Anyways, other than that, I actually still really do love this palette. The tones are stunning. I like that you have a little tiny bit of warmth, but most of the palette is cool tone. Obviously, when you're looking at this palette, you're going to get pretty similar eye looks. Like, there's not a ton of range or versatility to this palette, but as long as you know that going into it, I think that that's fine. Especially since these are more neutrally everyday tones that people would feel comfortable wearing, that you would get a lot of use out of. The shimmers in this are perfection because they're not too intense, which I am going for these days. They just give like a little tiny hint of sparkle on your eyes that make you look like you're put together and you're just like elegant. And I don't know, there's just something about these shimmers that are just really beautiful and elegant. That's like the word that pops in my head when I think about these, is that they're just elegant on the eyes. And then the mattes are really nice too. You have some cool tone mattes here, this one as well. And then you can warm it up with these 2 here. Kind of the opposite of Biba. This is a lot of shimmer, like mostly shimmer in this palette. Yeah, 10 shimmers to 5 mattes. I don't hate that, if I'm being honest. I like the options of having all the different shimmers to use, and I think that the mattes that she put in encompass really any mattes that you would need. So yeah, a lot of people sing the praises of the Glam palette. I am one of those people. I think it's stunning and beautiful. I need to reach for it more often. Shameless plug, I did use this in a recent video. It was a shop my stash video, so I will have that linked if you want to check it out and see this in action. In fourth place, we have another pretty new palette to me, but I just have really fallen head over heels in love with this that I wanted to rank it that high, and it is the Mini Biba palette. I have not had a chance to use this on my channel yet, but off camera, I've used this quite a few times, and it is the palette that I did go ahead and use on my eyes today, because even though I haven't shown me using it on camera, I did want to show a look with it, because every other time I've used it since I got it has been off camera in my everyday real life. So for this look right here, I took this shade and put it all into my crease. I mixed this one and this one, but mainly the lighter one on my outer corner and up into my crease, and then I use this beautiful shimmer all over the lid. This one I actually really like, but it's more of a pinky tone. Like when I put this on me, it pulls very pinky and peachy, and I didn't want that pink of an eye look today, even though this shade ended up pulling pretty pink on me as well. But this one pulls like even pinker, but actually, I don't think pinker is a word. Even more pink, I guess. But I wanted this palette for a very, very long time, and I'm glad I ended up picking it up. It was in the bundle with the Biba, the Mini Nude, a lipstick, and this that I got during Black Friday. The 4 or 5 times I've used it since I got it, I've absolutely loved my look. I got complimented on my makeup when I wore this to my friend's baby shower a couple weeks ago. One of my other friends was like, "Your eye look looks so pretty right now." And I was like, thank you so much. I felt so happy that she said that to me. So this is definitely one that I have been really, really loving the past couple of weeks, and I can see myself getting a lot of use out of in the future. I've also heard from quite a few of you guys that you love this palette as well. So I'm glad I picked it up. I think it was definitely a good purchase in my eyes, and I've been loving it. Okay, my top 3, 2 of them are minis, and one is a midi, larger one. So that's why I had to include the minis in my ranking, because I love them so much. Out of my top 4, 3 out of the 4 of them are like the mini palettes. So number 3 is the My Mini Dream palette. If you just need a good go-to neutrally eye look, this is going to be your mini to get. This is beautiful. When I first got this, I wasn't too impressed with it, mainly because of the shimmers. It says that they are metallics, and honestly, I don't think that they are. When I think of metallic from Natasha Denona, and maybe this is just like me not being correct, but when I think of metallic from her, I think of the shades in the Glam Face Palette that are super sparkly, super intense. These are more just like satiny shimmers to me. So when I read that they were metallic and then I tried them, I was pretty disappointed because they're not. Like you can see on my fingers, they're pretty shimmery. They look pretty similar. Even on the eye, they do look pretty similar. Like this one is slightly darker than this one. However, even though they're not as intense as like a metallic, in my opinion, they are still stunning on the eyes, like absolutely stunning. They look, again, kind of like the Glam palette. They're just elegant. They're not too intense. They're not too in your face. You're going to use these shades and just feel pretty. And then again, kind of like the Glam palette, I feel like the mattes she chose are perfect. This is a great transition. This is a great deepening. And then this one you can really deepen or line with. This is a perfect little all-inclusive, neutrally tone palette that you could pick up and use all of the tones, and you could use this all of the time. Like for work, for special occasions, for date nights, for hanging out with your girlfriends, like any occasion, I could see myself using this palette and being happy with the look and being happy that I chose it. So while this is a mini, it's small, I wasn't too on board with it at first. This has really grown on me over the past like year I've had it, and it's stunning and beautiful, and I love it, and I recommend it to you guys. Okay, I went back and forth. With my number 2 and my number 1 because I really love both of them, and I really could see either one being a favorite. But I had to decide, and I decided that number 2 is the I Need a Nude palette. This is stunning. Like truly, this palette is gorgeous. If you have a lighter skin tone, I think you would really, really love this palette. I don't know how much it would encompass a medium to deep skin tone, unfortunately. I mean, maybe because there are a couple deeper shades, and I do think that these mattes show up deeper on at least my skin tone than they do in the pan, which for medium to deep skin tones, that would be good. So I don't love that it's not as encompassing like skin tone wise, but for me and my first skin tone, I really love this palette. It's beautiful. One of the main things I like about it is the shimmers. There's different formulations in here. Like this one right here is a really intense, more foiledy one, as well as like this one up here. These are going to be like those more wham bam intense shimmers on your eye. These two, this one right here and this one, are more toppers, which add just a beautiful shimmer and glow and sheen to your look. This Whisper and Travertine shade up here, those are more of like the just simple shimmer shades. So I like that there are different options in the shimmers, different formulations, different finishes. So you're getting a lot of variety out of this palette. I will say the shimmers are it for me in this palette. I don't love the mattes. I don't hate the mattes. I just don't really love them. This Mesh, Tinder, and Stone shade all end up being pretty similar on the eye. This Fair shade and this Wit shade right here almost just pulled too peachy for the palette in my opinion. And then this one right here is really, really deep and dark, which I do like having that option, but I only really use it to line. So that's why I didn't make it my number one palette, because there are things about this that I don't enjoy. I don't love the mattes, but the shimmers in here, chef's kiss, love them. And every time I've used this palette, I've ended up liking the looks, and it's another one that I feel pretty when I use it. Okay, my number one palette. Some of you might be thinking, why'd you pick this over the I Need a Nude? But I just love it so much, and it has a special place in my heart, and I just love it. It is the Mini Nude palette. I love this so much that I rebought it, because as you can see, 2 of the shades have big pans in them, and it's a little bit on the older side, so I just kind of wanted a new fresh palette to start using. I'm going to retire this one after this video. I know I said that in the palette declutter video, but I really am going to retire at this point. So this had to be my number one, because like, how often do you repurchase an eyeshadow palette that you love it so much that you buy it again? I would beg to say not very often. So that's why I had to make it my number one. There's just something about this palette that for me personally, I love so much. The 2 mattes in here are beautiful. Again, they're just really perfect matte shades. Obviously, Natasha Denona is a makeup artist, so she understands like what works well together, but this is a beautiful transition shade. This can deepen. It doesn't look that deep on my finger here, but you really can get some depth out of this if you need to, which I enjoy. And then the 3 shimmers, this one right here is stunning and beautiful, and it's light enough to go on my inner corner, which I appreciate. This one, oh my gosh, you can't really tell in this swatch right here, but it has so many different colors of shimmers in it that make it very unique in my collection. It's a beautiful bronzy shade that I feel comfortable wearing even now that my preferences have changed. But when I wear it, there's just something special about it. It's not just a plain bronze. Like, if you really go up to my eyes and like look, and I like go like this, you can see all the different shades. It catches the light, all the different sparkles catch the light, and just it's beautiful. It's something better and more than just a bronze in my collection. And then this one right here, I used to not use this one because I thought it would be too warm on me, but I've started using it over the past like year or so, and oh, are you kidding me? Stunning. Absolutely stunning. I love this palette. Like, truly, every time I use it, it has never let me down one time. I used this palette when I did my makeup for my engagement pictures, for my rehearsal dinner, for my wedding, the whole time I was on my honeymoon in Jamaica with my husband. I'm pretty sure I use this for my maternity pictures. Yeah, pretty much anytime I need to know my eye look is going to look bomb and perfect, and it's not going to mess me up or like look bad or get patchy or anything, I reach for this palette. Any combination of these 5 shades are going to be absolutely stunning. Oh my gosh, I love it. Like I said, so much so I bought another one, which is kind of unheard of. Really quickly here at the end, I did want to kind of bring out the Biba palette again and show you guys. So this is the Biba palette, and then here you have the Mini Nude palette. So if you can see, like side by side, those shades are very, very similar to each other. You pretty much have the Mini Nude palette on this top row right here. I beg to say that I think the Mini Nude is actually prettier than the 5 shades in the Biba palette, but that's just my opinion. And then this makes sense because this is the Mini Biba, but you pretty much have the middle row right here in the Mini Biba palette. So yeah, I know I mentioned that earlier in the video, saving money and not getting the Biba palette if you didn't really like need the bottom row. So I just kind of wanted to show them side by side for you. And that was it, you guys. That was my Natasha Denona palette ranking video. Let me know down below. Do you agree with my ranking? Where would you have placed any of these? What's your number one? Ooh, I really want to know this. What's your number one favorite Natasha Denona palette? Please put that in the comments below. I am so curious. I would love to know. I highly doubt that it's going to be the Mini Nude from a bunch of you guys like me, but I would love to know your guys' number one favorite Natasha Denona palette. Please let me know down below in the comments. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. You're awesome and I love you. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you have not yet, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.